Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is you over 30 years ago.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
And this is your mom when you drive her back from therapy.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Roles change without us noticing, and in your new role, we help you help. AARP gives you the information to help care for your mom so that you can have patience with her, just like she did with you. Visit aarp.org/caregiving or call 1-877-333-5885 to get practical health and wellness tips to provide even better care for your loved one.
Are we there yet?
Remember, visit aarp.org/caregiving. AARP, we help you help. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
When I was little, I didn't talk for a long time. I liked things to always be the same. Anything new or different would scare and upset me. I was very sensitive to lights and sounds. It was almost like I had bigger eyes and ears than everyone else. So I built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. I didn't like looking people in the eye. It made me feel uncomfortable. I'd throw big tantrums over little things like when my socks didn't match. Sometimes I'd do the same things over and over. Until one day, I found out I had autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I learned how to live with it better.
You can see signs of autism in children as young as 18 months. Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes 2. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You're listening to the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. This is the MD's Fantasy Football Show with Dan Mader, giving you the X's and O's of all things fantasy on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Welcome back, MD Nation, to the show. You are listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, WWSRN. Download the app on iOS or Android, anywhere in your app stores. We got a great show for you guys today, as we always do, but very excited about today's show because we are going over some off-season stuff that broke later this week. We didn't even think we were going to be talking about more off-season stuff, frankly, this week. And because we didn't, we actually have extra content for you because we're talking about draft wide receivers, draft tight ends, where we think these guys could go, what their possibilities as fantasy assets are going to be. And as always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, but I'm joined here again today by Mr. Christopher Dowhauer. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm super excited about talking some more football. Like you said, it's been an exciting off season, and we're about to kick off some more about the draft as well.
Yeah, and draft is coming up. We're 3 weeks away now. I think almost exactly. Coming. We're going to be having the Belly Up Sports MDs and BUFL's NFL draft coverage April 29th and April 30th. We'll be starting a half hour before the draft actually starts to give you guys a preview show. Chris and I will be hosting that. We're going to have up to 50 different guests throughout the day 1 and day 2 festivities. It's going to be great. We're going to have pick-by-pick betting analysis with football analysis and fantasy analysis, everything you could possibly hope for in NFL draft coverage. We're going to be bringing it to you on all of your social media outlets, on YouTube, anywhere you can go. You will easily be able to access us to be able to watch that stream. And best part is it's commercial free. So you're not going to have to deal with that either. It's really going to be the best way for you guys to watch the draft this year. Very excited about that. But I do want to get today's show. We don't have Ben with us today. However, he did make sure that he pre-recorded the mailbag questions. So we will have that. He'll be here with us in spirit in that sense. And also gives me a chance to remind you guys, if you want to get on the mailbag segment or if you need any help in fantasy football purposes whatsoever, all you got to do is hit me up on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show. We will answer any one of your questions, help you in any way we possibly can, because that's what we're here to do. And the few questions we do like, we'll go ahead and put them on the show like we do every single week. We also have some polls we'll go over that MD Nation was kind enough to vote on to give us some idea of what the people are thinking out there in different fantasy situations coming up in 2021 and for some dynasty purposes as well. So all of that's going to be jam-packed in today's show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, presented to you by Belly Up Sports. So let's dive into it today. Let's dive into the head story of the week, which of course was the Sam Darnold trade to Carolina. He's gone. He's done. The Jets have said, you know what? Adam Gase is gone. Now Sam Darnold is gone. We are hitting the reset button completely, moving in with the new regime, especially with the head coach and everything. Joe Douglas has been there for a year, but essentially a new regime because he didn't really get to do his thing with Adam Gase there. Now, I had a million different thoughts about this, but Chris, I'm going to let you go ahead first. Give me, what you think this means from a fantasy perspective. Give me what you think this means for the Jets. Give me what you think this means for Carolina, because we can step outside the fantasy bubble in this instance, because the one nice thing about doing a fantasy football show in the springtime especially is that you can kind of step outside of the bubble a little bit. It doesn't have to be strictly fantasy all the time, and kind of give our football acumen here as well. So we have a chance to do that here. So go ahead. Tell me what you thought about this Sam Darnold trade.
I mean, I think it was an absolutely tremendous move by the Jets. I think that the Zach Wilson is a superstar, in my opinion. That's going to be a superstar quarterback in this league. And the ability to get a second rounder next year and a fourth rounder and a sixth rounder this year for a guy that they pretty much been shopping, I think, pretty much the whole off season. You've seen a lot of other quarterbacks get moved. Carson Wentz didn't really fetch the first rounder they were hoping for, but this isn't much farther behind than what Carson Wentz basically got the Eagles. I think that when you look at the Jets moving forward, like you talked about, a new regime, they have their guy. You see the league kind of moving in this direction where guys always try to get their guy in a sense. But I'm excited for the Jets. Carolina, on the other hand, not really sure what they're doing. They seem to they're kind of grasping, I think, at what was left on the market. They kind of struck out, it seems like, on the Matthew Stafford move. They struck out in Deshaun Watson, or Deshaun Watson kind of has his own issues, has kind of sabotaged that situation.
We're going to talk about that in a second, too.
But I also think that moving forward, it doesn't have a whole lot of implications fantasy-wise, in my opinion, for the Carolina Panthers. I don't think Sam Darnold's going to bring a whole lot different than Teddy Bridgewater kind of brought last year. Maybe a little bit more of pushing down the ball to the field, maybe a little more aggressive with the intermediate throws. But I really don't think it changes a lot for Carolina. On the Jets side, I do think it changes a lot for the Jets, where you have players like Mims, you have Crowder, you have Corey Davis. There's rumors they might add another weapon to that arsenal moving forward. And I think Zach Wilson has the arm talent and the ability to really open up the Jets' offense.
Yeah, we've talked about him time and time again, how he is our number 2 on our board. You went as far to say as you might have him as a 1A, 1B with Trevor Lawrence, which I can't really disagree with either, with the assessment that I've been able to see with him on tape. I'm right there with you. Yeah, I'm going to take this from the Jets standpoint. This was the most you were going to get back. There was a ton of reaction when this trade first went down about people blaming the Jets that, hey, why didn't you get a first rounder? Why didn't you get more? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, have you guys been paying attention to this entire offseason? He's been on the block since March, since probably before that, probably since they hired Robert Saleh. So the idea that they were going to be able to get more for him, how? Why? The quarterbacks, like you, to your point, are pretty much all off the market. After the 49ers made their move, you pretty much had Carolina and Denver as the last 2 teams in the top 10 who are looking for quarterbacks. And if it's not going to be a Deshaun Watson, if it wasn't going to be a big blockbuster trade for Russell Wilson, well, the last guy left is Sam Darnold. And if they get a second rounder, a 4th rounder, and a 6th rounder this year, the second and 4th rounder for next year, that is probably the best they could have done. I don't think they could have done much better than that. And they're set up now in a nice position this draft and next year's draft, where they're going to be able to make a lot of picks in the first 2 rounds. So when you're talking about bringing in a new regime who wants to hit the reset button, you have all the ammunition in the world now to truly build this team in whatever image that you want to build it in. So there's going to be no excuses now for Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh, because you're going to have all the pieces in place to hit the reset button and move in a different direction. To your point on the Carolina Panthers side, and I think we're in the minority here, Chris, because I think a lot of people look at Sam Darnold as this guy who still has this untapped potential because he's 23 years old, and I couldn't disagree more. He was bad before Adam Gase got there. Let's not forget that. And Adam Gase isn't the only reason he was bad. And as far as your point of like maybe he pushes the ball down the field more, does he? Because Teddy Bridgewater last season was 17th in deep ball attempts. Sam Darnold was 25th on a per-game basis. So I'm not talking about because Teddy Bridgewater played more games than Sam Darnold, he had more attempts. On a per-game basis, he threw the ball down the field more often than Sam Darnold did. And that's something that goes back to even when Robbie Anderson was on the team. We can go further back because I know last year, you mostly had Jameson Crowder, Denzel Mims didn't play too much. You had Brashad Perriman really as your only other deep threat. You go back to previous years, Sam Darnold, and this is a big reason why I had a problem with him coming out of USC, was that he has a mentality of a check down, play a conservative quarterback who doesn't have, sky's the limit type of arm talent to begin with. So I don't understand. I don't think this changes. I'm with you. I don't think this changes anything for Carolina. Not from a fantasy standpoint, not from a football standpoint, nothing. He is Sam Darnold. I'm sorry, Sam Darnold is Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, they're game managers at best. That's what they are. So this doesn't open up the field for Rob. And I saw all these, these tweets and all these guys talking about, the chemistry between Robbie Anderson and Sam Darnold and what that's going to mean and blah, blah, blah. Go back, actually look at the game logs with Robbie Anderson and Sam Darnold. Robbie Anderson wasn't worth anything in fantasy football until the last 4 to 5 games in the season. Because what would happen is Sam Darnold and Adam Gase would play their little check down game for the first 10 to 11 games of the season. Then suddenly, when there's nothing left to lose, Darnold said, you know what, fine, I'll start throwing it up to Robbie Anderson down the field. And then it would be for the fantasy playoffs. And I think this is why, especially in the fantasy industry, people forget this. It would be in the fantasy playoffs that Robbie Anderson would suddenly come alive. Because now all of a sudden they decided to just chuck the ball down the field because they had nothing to lose at that point. But it wouldn't be until that point that they would actually get aggressive, that Sam Darnold actually aggressive. And this is my point of why Darnold has to have a lot of blame for why he is a bust outside of Adam Gase, because Adam Gase may call up the plays, and it may be a terrible scheme, and you're never going to get a disagreement out of me for that. I've been riding Adam Gase's tail ever since his Miami, frankly, ever since the Chicago days. And even on this show, since this show has started, I've ridden his tail. But it's still Sam Darnold at the end of the day who decides who he's going to throw the ball to, where he's going to go. So that's why I put this on him. So that is why I have a big problem with this when it comes to Carolina. I don't see the upside here. I don't see you getting better. You want to make the argument to me that because he's 23 and that you think with Matt Rule and Joe Brady, because they're such good offensive minds, that they can make a change here. I'll give you that argument to an extent. Because Matt Rule and Joe Brady have earned that after what we saw of them last season, that they might have the benefit of the doubt for me when it comes to that. But still, when it comes to actual talent, nobody wants to recognize it because they still have this Sam Darnold USC picture in their head of what they thought he might be. He is Teddy Bridgewater. He is. So from a fantasy standpoint, this changes nothing for Carolina. Darnold doesn't become a fantasy quarterback relevant in my mind. We'll see where Teddy Bridgewater winds up going. I have no doubt that they'll find a way to move him at some point. And now it also affects the draft because Carolina is not going to be a team looking to move up anymore. So now it makes it real interesting with Denver and New England, how this whole thing is going to go down. And for the Jets, I love it. I've said it on this show numerous times. Zach Wilson is the pick that the Jets need to make. He is the guy that they need to move on from. He is the franchise quarterback, and he can turn an organization around. And when you add his skill set to that Shanahan concept offense and what they're going to be able to do, the Jets are going to have a good rushing attack. And I feel pretty confident they're going to wind up drafting a running back in the second round. It's not going to be Tevin Coleman. It's not going to be LaMichael Perine. They're going to draft another running back, I think, in the second round, or maybe they'll wait till the third round. But I still think you can get, if they got a Javonte Williams in that system in the second round with Zach Wilson, and I like some of the talent they have at the wide receiver position, especially if Denzel Mims can take the next step up. This is an offense that could instantly be at least competent, even in Zach Wilson's rookie year. So from a fantasy standpoint, I am going to have Zach Wilson as a streaming option. Not a guy I'm going to be drafting in redraft leagues, but a streaming option because he's going to run the ball and he's going to be given that opportunity. And I like the offensive fit that he is going to be in. From a dynasty standpoint, it just kind of confirms that I'm going to go, if it's super flex leagues, I'm going to go Lawrence and Zach Wilson 1 and 2. Either way, even if it's a single quarterback league, Wilson's going to be my second rookie running back off the board, period. So that's where it affects it from a dynasty position. But this trade was huge because it so many angles that you had to play this from. Is there anything about what I said that you want to rebuttal on?
No, I just want to add to it a little bit. I think one of the things that also needs to be thrown into the equation is Sam Darnold due to make $18.8 million next year. So the Jets not only were able to get picks, they have a guy in the last year of his deal who they frankly weren't sure if they're going to pay. We kind of saw this play out with Mitchell Trubisky last year in Chicago. They moved ahead and got a pick before they blew up in their face, basically. And I think that was genius on their part. While Carolina basically is on the same hook for another $18 million, similar to Bridgewater's deal was with $20 million. They didn't really open up any kind of cap space, and they pretty much have to evaluate this year immediately, is he the guy long-term or not the long-term? And I think when you look at, will Sam Darnold improve with the surrounding talent in Carolina? Will he improve with the better coaching, not being on Adam Gase? Sure. But this isn't a Ryan Tannehill situation. Ryan Tannehill had to deal with Adam Gase for most of his career, and once he went to Tennessee, everybody saw, look how much better he is now. Sam Darnold didn't have any favors done by him from the Jets. The Jets did not sign him with talent. Yes, there wasn't great players. No, it was a great line. Adam Gase is a terrible offensive coordinator and a terrible coach. Having said all that, they didn't force him to see ghosts. It didn't force him to have 31, finished 31st in QBR last year. I think we look at a guy, like to your point, that we've seen kind of his upside, so to speak. He wasn't that great in USC. People forget this guy came in with a lot of esteem and almost lost his job 2 or 3 times while he's at USC. So I'm not super impressed by this. And I think that Carolina, like I said, is kind of grasping at straws. Now they keep reassuring people that doesn't mean they're locked in at quarterback moving forward, and they can still get out of the contract. But this isn't even a Josh Rosen situation where they still have 3 or 4 years to Miami still have 3 or 4 years to kind of vote $2 million player to evaluate what they want to do moving forward. This is a guy who got picked number 3, and he's going to make number 3 money next year. So that's, to me, just
and
Jets did a great move.
With the draft capital that they gave up, to your point, you have to know what he is this year if you're going to pay him or not. Sam Darnold's a starter for Carolina. They can say all they want. They can say what they want to about them not being locked in a quarterback when it comes to the NFL draft. They're like, oh, we might still take what? No, that is a quintessential lie, because you have to start Sam Darnold now, because you have to know if it's going to be worth the investment that you just gave up for the future. Absolutely. And the last thing I'll just add to that, for those people out there who want to look at, Sam Darnold was better than Teddy Bridgewater from fantasy perspective. Teddy Bridgewater 15.5 fantasy points per game last year. Sam Darnold 10.6. Don't tell me he's an improvement in any kind of capacity. Unfortunately, we do have to give an update, I felt like, this week on Deshaun Watson. Again, now this is a fantasy show, so we will refrain from getting into too many of the legal details or anything like that. But it's up to 22 women. So now we're trying to help you guys out from a dynasty perspective right now. Redraft will take care of itself. We'll know in August if he's stepping on the field or not. So I'm not worried about this from a redraft perspective. But from a dynasty perspective, if you have Deshaun Watson, what do you do? And here's my thing. You have to hold. You do. Because right now, you are going to get rock bottom if you try to trade him away. And on the off chance that he somehow comes out of this and is able to still play this season, then you're going to have more value keeping him than you are going to be trading away. And if you don't have him, well, you know what? If you want to see if you can get him at a rock bottom price, and somebody's just like, you know what? The hell with this. I want to just get out of the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. Or sometimes, and I think this is a good point here, and it kind of plays to the show, because one of the things about this show that I like to harp on is that we are here to help everyone try to be a better fantasy player by thinking about it from every variable. There's a lot of people out there who will play fantasy football with their heart rather than with their head. And what I mean by that in this situation is that they're going to look at this and say, Deshaun Watson is a scumbag. I don't want him on my fantasy team anymore. And therefore, you might be able to get him for rock bottom prices. So I would throw a couple of offers out there. You're not going to have to give up much just to see what would happen, because it's a high reward, low risk situation if you're standing from a dynasty standpoint, if you're trying to buy Watson. Now, obviously, don't give up anything crazy of value, but see if the owner in your league who has him just wants to move on. I would typically do that. Regardless of what's happening with the legal situation, it's worth taking the risk on. So that's just from a fantasy football mindset. You have anything to add to that?
No, I think you make an excellent point. I mean, there's nothing to really gain from moving on from him other than if it's something personal, I respect that. But to your point, if you're trying to win fantasy, then you do try to maybe throw some offers out there, see if you can get rock bottom prices. I do wonder how it affects some of the other players around him, though, like a Brandon Cooks and things along those lines. It's going to be a really interesting year to kind of see how things unfold. And even if we don't have things resolved, you still have to see what the kind of commissioner is going to do. Will he be put on an exempt list? Hopefully, maybe you have an IR position where, depending on how your league rules work, maybe you can put him on an IR during that time frame. So there's some things you have to kind of consider, depending what your rules in your league are, to see how aggressive or unaggressive you should be with using Deshaun Watson or moving Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. I do want to kind of talk about that a little bit, though, like the point of people using their principles when playing fantasy football. Look, you play however you want to play. But what I will say is this: fantasy football, you are better at it when you use your head and not your heart. So in these type of situations, you're not a real organization. You're not putting out PR fires because you have Deshaun Watson on your team. So I don't get the whole idea of like, this guy's a scumbag, I'm not going to have him in fantasy football. I want to win the league, whatever cost that is. This is a fantasy game. It's a computer simulated game at the end of the day. You are not making any kind of protest or political statement or a morality statement whatsoever when you're like, I'm not going to have this guy on my fantasy team. That's just me. I just want to point that out there. Again, everyone plays how they want to play, how you want to have fun with it. That's completely up to you. But if you want to win, don't play with your heart. Play with your head. That's my piece of advice. Last thing that I want to talk about from the offseason standpoint before we get into the wide receivers for today's show is Giovanni Bernard being cut by the Cincinnati Bengals.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Exactly my thoughts too. Because Bernard has been a thorn in Joe Mixon's behind when it comes to fantasy value, especially starting off the season. It happened the last 2 years. We saw it with Zach Taylor. Last 2 years, we go into it expecting Joe Mixon to get his bell cow workload, like, he should be getting. And then what winds up happening is Giovanni Bernard comes in and inexplicably is getting an insane amount of targets, an insane amount of snaps on third downs and 2-minute drills. And I'm blowing my mind because I'm like, pretty sure Joe Mixon can catch the ball. He's probably your best playmaker, probably your best offensive playmaker, period. Don't know why this guy keeps going off the field. And then, last year Mixon gets hurt, but we even saw it to some degree last year before he got hurt and the year before, where he was like fantasy irrelevant, and all of a sudden like, hey, you know what? We will give you the ball 20 plus times. And then he goes off like a jackhammer and is the RB1 that he should be. And the Bengals offense is better because they're giving him the ball. So now that Giovanni Bernard is finally out of the equation, and I've been big on Joe Mixon anyway, a lot of people are sour on him because of the injury situation. I'm going to be stealing him and what his ADP is going to be this year. I'm going to tell you that because in redraft leagues, I'm looking at a guy who might be falling to the third round because of the way people are souring on him at the moment. And in dynasty leagues, guys only want to touch him. You can buy Joe Mixon low right now. I'm all over him, especially with Giovanni Bernard gone, because now in my mind, that guarantees me, they're not going to bring anybody of significance in, that guarantees me that early on in the season, Mixon's going to be getting his 20 plus touches right off the bat. That's all he needs to be very, very successful. Where are you at on this?
First of all, I'm wondering, is Oakland going to sign Giovanni Bernard too? Or no, sorry, Vegas, not Oakland. Sorry, guys. But I do have to say, it's music to my ears. I'm a big Joe Mixon fan. I think he's one of the more talented backs in the backfield in running back position. I don't understand why he wasn't throwing the ball, why Giovanni played third downs and was a designated pass catcher. I thought they should have moved on from him 2 years ago. They re-signed him. It made me sick to my stomach when that happened. Last year, you saw when Joe Mixon was utilized, to your point, he is a superstar running back. And he did start getting more targets as the season kind of moved on. He did wind up getting hurt. People were concerned about the injuries. I'm not. Running backs get hurt sometimes, particularly behind crappy offensive lines. But Cincinnati has a chance to actually improve their offensive line this offseason. And you look at Joe Mixon and you look at Todd Gurley, and you kind of remember Todd Gurley had struggled a year or two. And all of a sudden, he blew up in Sean McVay's system. Part of that blow up was he got thrown the ball. I see Joe Mixon having a very similar blow up situation. Not only can this guy run the ball, he can catch the ball, and an offense that should be better than it's been in the last couple of years. That team's going to score some points. I think Joe Mixon is going to be one of the steals of the draft, and I would love if he falls to the third round. If he falls to the third round at any of your, anybody's picks out or anybody's drafts out there, you have to jump all over him. He's going to be an RB1 this year. I have no question in my mind, and I know that's a player that I definitely will be targeting.
Yeah, we're 100% in line when it comes to Joe Mixon and what this Bernard cut actually means, and that is more fantasy impactful than I think people really realize. Before we get into our NFL draft wide receivers, I want to let you guys know that this segment is sponsored by Manscaped, and with the first pick in the 2021 draft, men's grooming, the Ball Saxonville Sagwires select Manscaped, the leaders in below the waist grooming. Looks like Mel Kiper gave this an A+ grade because this pick is a major upgrade for that Bush defense. For all of my NFL draft fans out there, we have an exclusive 20% off promo code BellyUpFantasy at manscaped.com. That's the reason why Manscaped is the guaranteed #1 pick, because of their performance package. This package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Inside the performance package, you'll find products and liquid formulations that have been developed to turn your bathroom into a salon for your ball support. So support this show. Get 20% off. Get free shipping when you use the promo code BellyUpFantasy at manscaped.com. All right. So let's talk about these wide receivers. And we're going to talk about the tight ends too in the next segment as well. But let's kick it off with our #1 guy, without a doubt. No question about it. Never was. Mr. Jamar Chase. 6'1", 200 pounds. The guy ran a crazy 4.3 at his pro day. Going to LSU. Absolutely insane. Best route runner. Best explosive player. Can play inside. Can play outside. I'm a huge fan of Jamar Chase. Where are you at, Chris, on Jamar Chase?
I think Jamar Chase is an absolute stud. I heard a lot of different debate over who the top receiver is. We heard a lot of talk about Miami targeting Smith at 3. I could not believe there's any chance that anybody would pass on this guy as a top receiver for their team if you're looking for a playmaker. To your point, he runs outstanding routes. He's explosive. The thing I like about Chase the most is that there's nobody that can slow him down. This guy just basically was averaging about 3 yards of separation per play, as you see in the kind of highlight in the background right now. This guy's just explosive. There's nobody out there that can stick him. And on top of it, he can run patterns. He can get in and out of his breaks well. And I think people kind of forgot because he got banged up a little bit last year and missed some time, that this guy's going to be, I'm sorry, he sat out last year, I believe. He's going to be a superstar. And I think this guy is by far my best receiver in this draft. And if I have an opportunity to draft him in some kind of long-term league, I'm looking to do so.
He ran a 4.38 40, had a 41-inch vertical. He measured in at actually 6'3", 201, so a little taller than what we thought. 10 pounds lighter, which I actually kind of like for the type of receiver that he is, to be maybe 200 instead of 210. Had an 11-foot broad jump, a 3.99 shuttle, and a 6.96 cone drill. I love everything about him. He is a dominant wide receiver. He is a true number one. He is a guy who looks every bit of a superstar receiver that you would want to see, and he belongs in the top 10. Now, where does he go in the draft? And that's kind of the next thing we want to kind of get into and what that fit may be. A lot of people want to say Cincinnati. I've talked to you about this. I'm of the mindset, especially now that we know quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3, possibly 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on what happens with the Atlanta pick. I don't see how, if you're Cincinnati, you can pass on a Sewell. With how bad that offensive line is, the fact that your franchise quarterback's already coming off an ACL injury, your number one priority has to be to protect your investment, your number one pick from last year. So I don't see how you slide on a Penei Sewell. So all this talk about reuniting Chase with Joe Burrow, that, in my opinion, would be a mistake. And honestly, from a fantasy standpoint, I don't really want to see it either, because she's going to have to share targets with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd on top of all of it. So I'd rather see him go somewhere else. I'd rather see him fall to Miami or Detroit. I was drawing a blank there. Or Detroit. I like Miami a lot because I think he would fit very, very well with a Devontae Parker and a Will Fuller, and then you even have Preston Williams to see if he can get healthy and get right. That's a ton of weapons for Tua Tagovailoa. So I love it for Miami. I really love it for Detroit, more so from a fantasy perspective, because in Detroit, you want to talk about an opportunity to become a target monster. There's nobody else to throw the ball to besides TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift as checkdowns. So if you're going to run a predominantly play-action-based offense with Jared Goff and Anthony Lynn, who already does that anyway, Jamar Chase is going to be the guy who can really help you actually have that explosive factor, get you that number one wide receiver. Where are your places that you would like to see him go, and where do you think, logically, he'll actually wind up to?
I think the Dolphins are the perfect fit. You kind of pointed out the weapons they have in place. I think he's a perfect complement to Devontae Parker. I think that he needs somebody and Will Fuller. They only signed Will Fuller to a 1-year deal. So I think this is a player that you can look at not only maybe as a possible replacement for Fuller on the outside, but while Fuller's still there, as you pointed out, he can play anywhere on the field. I love him, the idea of him in Miami. Detroit, I think, is a good idea because he would absolutely be a target monster. If I wanted to go all in and just wanted to see explosive offense, I wouldn't mind seeing him in Atlanta. Because there is some consideration about moving on Julio Jones after this year.
Yeah.
And he would be an awesome compliment while Julio's still there. But then with Ridley, I think moving forward, he'd be a great compliment as well. So I think those three places are where I think would be good fits. I do have concerns that Cincinnati may take him. Now, while I don't necessarily poo-poo it maybe as much as you would, I do agree Sewell by far should be their pick. But I am hearing a lot that teams are questioning whether he's even the top tackle in the draft right now, which is
beyond ridiculous. Yeah.
Yes, it's asinine. And I think when you look at somebody like him, it does make some sense. You do have the camaraderie or the experience playing with Joe Burrow. I do hear Joe Burrow is beating the drum that he wants Jamar Chase.
That doesn't surprise me.
And you can't. Well, we also can't blame him. I mean, we saw what Jefferson did last year, and he was dominant for Minnesota. And this guy wasn't even the best receiver on his team. So I think that's something we have to kind of keep in mind. This guy is I think is a hell of a talent, and I think that it wouldn't super upset me if he goes to Cincinnati, just because I do think he complements Higgins perfectly. But I do agree that I think they should take Sewell. Now, I will give the draft that it is a pretty deep draft at offensive line this year. Cincinnati has opportunity to kind of upgrade, even if they don't take Sewell at tackle at the 3rd pick. But I wouldn't be surprised if you do see maybe he goes there.
I want to make it clear, I'm not going to poo-poo it, as you would say, for the Cincinnati Bengals or for Jamar Chase. I want to see the guy get the most fantasy potential, which I believe would be with the Dolphins, because I think they'll move on from Will Fuller next year, or with Detroit, where he would just be the clear-cut guy right off the bat and be targeted. He would have redraft implications right off the bat with Detroit, with the amount of targets that he would be seeing, where Cincinnati's going to have to share a little bit. I understand with the Dolphins, the first year's going to share a little bit, but he's got an opening there. Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And maybe they just turn into this great, prolific offense that it doesn't matter. Everybody gets to eat. But again, even when you see that, usually, typically speaking, when you have 3 really good wide receivers, then your fantasy value, even though it couldn't be really good, can still be very inconsistent. So that's just kind of where, but also, more to the point of, I just think they have to pick Sewell there. I think you have to get the building blocks that you really need to protect your quarterback and to help out Joe Mixon too. Help out that offense in general. You got to get that offensive line better. I think that's more of a priority than a Jamar Chase would be. Let's talk about our next guy who didn't have a pro day, decided not to do anything with his pro day. I was very disappointed because I wanted to see how fast he was going to run. But Jalen Waddle coming in, 5'10", 182, Alabama. He's expected to go somewhere between, that 5th pick and 15th pick, somewhere in the top 15. We most likely will see Jalen Waddle go. He is going to be my number 2 on the board. I don't want to give too much away because we are going to talk about our top 5 prospects at each position this upcoming Tuesday on the Belly Up Fantasy Live Football Edition show at 8:30. At Belly Up Fantasy on your social media accounts and Belly Up Sports on YouTube. So I don't give too much away, but he is going to be my number 2 guy. And I want to point that out on this show because Devonta Smith's everyone's number 2 guy, or at least the consensus number 2 guy for the most part. Jalen Waddle is a more special, more dynamic type of wide receiver. And when he was on the field, he was the lead guy over Devonta Smith. You can even look earlier in the season before he got hurt with his ankle injury. He was outperforming Devonta Smith up until that point. He is the guy. There's something special about his game. He is elite fast, an elite home run threat, but he also runs pretty good routes. He's got really good hips. He can sink in and out of his breaks, which, again, you have another guy that even though he's 5'10", 182, he has very active hands. He can play inside and outside. And that's why I wound up putting him as my number 2 receiver overall. Chris, what do you think about Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith? We'll just lump Devonta Smith into this conversation as well. What do you think about those two, where they stack up and all that?
So I had Devonta Smith as probably actually my 4th wide receiver in this draft. And I think we're going to get to who I think is higher. Waddle, I think, is kind of tied for the other guy right now. I love Waddle depending what you're looking for. Not that he's not explosive, not that he can fit any team, but one of the things that he's a really good player with his yards after the catch. This guy has the ability to take it 90 yards from having taking a 1-yard catch and breaking it 90 yards. There's not a lot of guys that can do that. I think it's different between him and Smith. Smith is a good long strider. He runs good routes. He's a great. He's good at getting out of his breaks. He's a little bit taller, but I think when you look at the explosiveness, and in today's game where teams are utilizing the passing game, the short passing game more and more. I think this is a guy that you just have to look at as a dynamic playmaker. We kind of see a lot of guys like Brandon Ayuk from the 49ers last year, where if you can just get certain guys the ball, how they can create, this guy can do that and run patterns and take the top off. So I do think that he's definitely better than Smith. I also think he's a little bit thicker than Smith. They weigh about the same, but about 3 inches difference in height.
He's built differently.
Yeah, and you could see it in the highlights. Just yards after the catches where Waddle excels. Guys can't bring him down. He's not an easy one-arm tackle. And like I said, this is a guy that you can feature all over the field, even out of backfield. I think this is a guy that teams will be drooling over themselves because there's so many opportunities in different ways you could actually utilize him. He's not quite as fast or quick as Tyreek Hill, but as Tyreek Hill's kind of used, I think he can be similarly used.
I agree with that full-heartedly. Look, Devonta Smith will also be my number 4 receiver. Since you said yours, I'll say mine. But the big reason why I have Waddle ahead of Devonta Smith in general is because he's just a more complete receiver with a more elite speed skill set as well. Devonta Smith, I think he's a very good wide receiver. I think he's definitely a top 20 first round type of talent wide receiver. But my problem with him, and ultimately why I have him at number 4 overall, and part of it that it's a top heavy wide receiver class, but the top is actually pretty good across the board. So it's partly that, but also partly because this is a guy that I think you have to game plan and line him up in situations where he's going to have space. He doesn't have the best combat hands in the world to be able to get off the line of scrimmage when bigger corners who are capable to play actual bump and run defense are able to jam at the line. You saw that in college. When he actually was able to play against a physical corner who can bump him at the line, he had a hard time getting off the line of scrimmage. That goes to his size, his incredibly lean build. So I struggle with the idea that Devonta Smith's ever going to be that effective on the outside unless he figures out something with his hands and gets more fight in his hands. The other thing is that because of his size, I don't see him going across the middle very often in NFL's schemes today either. Kind of like with Marquise Brown, they avoid Marquise Brown going across the middle. I could see a similar situation with Devonta Smith where the team will avoid having him go across the middle. So to me, that screams that you're going to have to strictly be a slot receiver who operates in and out of the middle instead of going from, the perimeter across and doing all these ins and outs. And that's where I kind of have some questions. I think he's a very fluid route runner. Everything he does is very, very smooth. He's a great athlete, everything like that. And I think if you feature him and move him around, he can be a centerpiece in your offense. That's why ultimately he's still a first-round receiver in my book. And that's ultimately what we saw what happened with Alabama, why he was so proficient with Alabama last year. What the best, I don't know, that might have been the best college wide receiver year ever. So if you use him that way, then yes, he's going to be a great wide receiver. But this is why I have him number 4. I don't have him as this complete weapon, and he would be an outlier in the sense of his size if he were to actually be proficient. The comparison that I keep hearing that, I think people who really love Devonta Smith want to latch to is the idea that he might have a chance is Marvin Harrison. And again, I go back to Marvin Harrison was already more naturally, physical in the way he played coming into the league, but also he had some of the best hands, the best combat. I don't mean hands catching the football. I mean the best fighting hands to break the arms of the corners trying to jam him at the line and get off the line of scrimmage. If Devonta Smith can develop that, then maybe he could be the Marvin Harrison. I don't rule that out, but I don't see that yet on tape, and that's why he's going to be number 4 on my list. That's why I have Waddle ahead. Now, from a fantasy standpoint, where I want to see these guys go, I think Waddle on the Philadelphia Eagles, 1, I think that's a realistic spot for him to go to, but 2, I think that would be very interesting because he would step into a situation right away where he would have to be the number 1 targeted wide receiver. He's instantly better, miles better than Jalen Reagor. I'm not a Jalen Reagor fan. He's a one-trick pony, and that one trick ain't even elite to begin with. The other receivers are Travis Fulgham. Yeah, that fell apart real quick last year. Surprise, surprise. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, is that even a thing anymore? I don't think it is. Greg Ward, who cares? He's just a guy holding down the slot receiver position. The only other real target monsters that are on the Philadelphia Eagles will be Dallas Goedert, just assuming that Zach Ertz isn't going to be there, assuming they'll be able to find a way to get rid of him, and then checking it down to Miles Sanders. So if Jalen Waddle goes there with Jalen Hurts, and they have this RPO play action type of offense where Waddle's getting moved all over the field and gets to be the home run threat, this is a guy who's going to be probably not going to be a target monster in a sense where I think he's going to get 8 to 10 targets, but consistently 5 to 7 and be able to win you the week because he can hit a home run at any moment. For Smith, I would go a little bit. I think he is going to fall a little bit lower. And we see more and more mock drafts now where Smith is falling to like the 15-ish type of range, somewhere along those lines. I do think the Chargers would be a nice fit for Devonta Smith, be able to kind of play on the play inside outside with Keenan Allen. Mike Williams can kind of be the big man, goes down the field. They're going to be moving to more of a 3 receiver set type of offense with Joe Lombardi anyway. So I do think he would be a nice fit with the Chargers. I also like him quite a bit if he were to fall to the Arizona Cardinals, because I think you need an upgrade over Christian Kirk. You need a guy who can actually kind of play that inside role. They have AJ Green, but honestly, I think AJ Green's gonna be nothing more than really, in their minds, a red zone threat. But if you have him paired up, Devonta Smith, that is, with a DeAndre Hopkins, and he's able to play the inside quite a bit off of that, and you're able to put him in situations where he's going to be able to line up off the line of scrimmage, I like that fit quite a bit too there. So what are your thoughts with where you want to see Waddle and where you want to see Devonta Smith wind up going and where you think they might actually go?
So I think that when it comes to Waddle, I think the prime fit for me in my mind would be Detroit, honestly. You talked about the lack of playmakers that they kind of have. I see him kind of filling multiple roles in Anthony Lynn's offense. He can be the Keenan Allen, where he can be that kind of slot, a short catch guy, but he can break more plays, but he can also stretch the field. I think when you look at Detroit, what they have kind of in place, they need somebody that can kind of create for Goff. Goff isn't great at necessarily pushing the ball down the field consistently, but he does like guys who can get separation. I talked about how good Chase was with separation. Waddle was right there too. He's averaged over 3 yards per separation per play on as well last year. That separation makes throws easy for Goff, and I think when you look at that offense, he could easily be featured. He can catch the screens. He can get reverses. I kind of see him being the jack of all trades on the offense, and that's something they kind of would be able to utilize and kind of need. I could also see the Eagle fit. I don't mind that fit. I'm a little concerned that they have too many guys that are a little bit too similar. Not to such that.
Yeah, but Waddle's actually good. That's the difference.
Well, yeah, I know you hate Jalen Reagor. I know that. I'm not quite the hater of Reagor that you are, but I do think one of the things that Jalen Hurts could use more so is a guy can go up and get the ball. I don't know if that's necessarily what you're looking for a Waddle. I think the Eagles have a lot of little holes that they could actually address in that pick. So I'm not as keen on that, but I do think that he would be a good fit in the sense that when you look at like I said, I talked about Brandon Ayuk. You saw how he was kind of developed and used in the 49ers last year. Deebo Samuel. Waddle could do all those things too. So with the new coaching regime that's going in, I think you're going to see him an opportunity to try to move him around, be utilized a little bit differently. I think for me, the best place for him would be Detroit. As for Devontae Smith, I think that his best fit would be somewhere that I think the Chargers is probably the best. We're going to get more in our draft show back where I think the best fits for all these players are going to be. Mm-hmm. But I do think the Chargers make a lot of sense. They need somebody that can kind of stretch the field. They have certain playmakers in place. They have Mike Williams already on the outside. They already have Keenan Allen. I think Smith is kind of that icing on the cake for Justin Herbert if you want him to develop to the next level. I also don't mind the idea of him going to, this might be surprising to some people, Denver. I'm not a big Hamler fan from Penn State. I don't think that he's necessarily a star player in any kind of capacity. And I think if you pair him up with Judy and pair him up with Courtland Sutton moving forward, no matter what you have a quarterback, you should be okay. Although Teddy Bridgewater, agent should be calling Denver.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting landing spot for him too. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I kind of like that take a little bit, but the only thing is I don't think it's I don't think it's a reality or realistic as far as that's going to go, because I just don't see Denver with all the capital they've spent at wide receiver the past few drafts. I just don't see them going that direction with it. So that would be my only caveat. But if it did happen, I'm with you. I mean, even if you like KJ Hamler, I don't think anybody would sit here and say Devonta Smith is an infinitely more talented and would fit, Jerry Jeudy and a Courtland Sutton really, really well in a three wide receiver predominant offense with Pat Shurmur. So yeah, I mean, that would be a nice fit. But that'd be more of a nice fit from a football standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint. I don't know how many targets he gets in that situation, especially if it's Drew Lock at quarterback.
Well, I don't know how many targets he gets as the Chargers either, if that's
that's fair. That's fair.
But I do think if you're talking about fantasy-wise where he'd be an ideal fit, you got a team sitting at 15 that could move up New England. I think that he'd be a nice. They need something on the outside. Need some kind of somebody to stretch that field in there.
New England is such an interesting situation right now, aren't they? Because you have all these people talking about that they're serious about mortgaging everything to move up as high as 4, possibly to try to take a quarterback. New England's sitting there at 15. There's a million ways you could see him go, and I can't envision Bill Belichick selling the farm for a quarterback and moving up that high, because he's never done it really, especially when it comes to the first round. But they're really an interesting spot. I agree with you. I mean, any wide receiver, if they were to stay at 15, and any wide receiver that fell to them there would be dynasty gold, because of the targets that you would be looking at. And I want to go back to that too, because Devontae Smith on the Chargers, I like him there dynasty fantasy purposes wise, because Keenan Allen's getting a little bit older. I think they're going to move on from Mike Williams next year. So I think it's a year away before he become, at least the wide receiver 2 on the team, if not the wide receiver 1, just to kind of go back on that. But yeah, continue with your point with the Patriots. I just had to butt in there because that's such an interesting spot with what they're going to do in the draft.
Absolutely. But like you said, that we were talking about fantasy wise, I do think that would be a nice fit for him.
Yeah.
Because he can line up different places on the field for them, and they could utilize him different ways.
He could be a more athletic Julian Edelman, quite frankly, for them. I want to take a quick break before we move on to our next slot of wide receivers. We'll come back on the other side. We have more receiver talk. We'll get to a few tight ends, and we still have the mailbag segment at the end of the show. So please continue to listen to the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. WWSRN presents to you by Belly Up Sports.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ed Council.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! It's now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is you over 30 years ago.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
And this is your mom when you drive her back from therapy.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Roles change without us noticing, and in your new role, we help you help. AARP gives you the information to help care for your mom so that you can have patience with her, just like she did with you. Visit aarp.org/caregiving or call 1-877-333-5885 to get practical health and wellness tips to provide even better care for your loved one.
Are we there yet?
Remember, visit aarp.org/caregiving. AARP, we help you help. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Welcome back, MD Nation, to the show. You are listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, WWSRN, also presented to you by Belly Up Sports. Make sure you go ahead and check them out on your Android and iOS apps for the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Some great content coming out there, and bellyupfantasysports.com, because we got articles flying out left and right now as we get up prepared for the draft for your dynasty leagues, especially, but what we are value expecting heading into 2021. We've been talking about some of our top wide receivers. We talked about the Sam Darnold trade. We talked about Giovanni Bernard getting cut and what that means for Joe Mixon. We gave you guys a Deshaun Watson update all there in the first segment. The next day, we're going to continue on with our wide receivers talk. We have some tight ends we want to talk about, and we have the mailbag segment for you at the very end. And I want to let you guys know that this next segment is going to be brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight. It is a daily fantasy sports gaming website with a number of unique ways to win money on your favorite sports and players. It's a mix of daily fantasy and prop games. Just download the app, go to monkeyknifefight.com, and use the promo code BELLYUP for a dollar-to-dollar match on your deposit of up to $50 plus an additional $5. That's potentially an instant $55 free dollars for you to play with today by using the promo code BELLYUP when you sign up at monkeyknifefight.com, or you can download the app on iOS or your Android Play Store. So, Chris, let's talk about our next top wide receiver, which is Rashad Bateman. And I had a debate whether or not he was my number 2, frankly, because this guy is one of the most complete receivers that you are going to see in this draft class. And I'm going to let you go first because there's a couple of things that I want to talk about when it comes to him and his pro day and what we've seen. But I'm going to let you talk about Rashad Bateman first. Go ahead.
As you know, I absolutely love Rashad Bateman. I am debating if he's my number 2. Him and Waddle are neck and neck. After the 40 you're going to talk about, I have to feel like he might be ahead of Waddle now. This guy is a true number 1 receiver. He can run all the routes. He's tall. He can run inside or outside, and he's explosive, as he showed. I think this guy has all the makings to be a star. He reminds me a lot of DeAndre Hopkins, but a little bit faster after the 40 we saw. And this guy is, to me, is one of the studs in this draft. Where I see him as a fit, we talked a lot about Detroit. I think Detroit obviously needs some kind of playmakers. Where I really like to see him wind up going is the Panthers. I don't think the Panthers have a true number 1 right now.
You stole
Joe
my
Brady. Did I?
Go ahead.
Well, because I feel like Joe Brady has shown he has the ability to utilize multiple weapons. That was what he did so well in LSU. And when you look at Robbie Anderson, you look at DJ Moore, to me, they're 2 complementary players. They're not true number 1s. I think Bateman slides in there perfectly. It sucks Sam Darnold as his quarterback, but other than that, I think everything else kind of aligns for him as a perfect fit there. And I just absolutely love this guy. I think that people were really trying to question whether he could still play, how good he was, because he didn't play much last year. A lot of these guys who sat out last year, there's an assumption that they just aren't good anymore. Let's be real. These guys are preparing to play pro football for the past year. It wasn't like they were sitting on their butts playing PlayStation the entire time. And I think that he pretty much showed that with that 40 he ran. This guy's coming to ball. And when he's out there, he has shown nothing but being a stud. And he played at Minnesota. Minnesota's quarterback play is horrible. So having a ball thrown from Sam Darnold probably would actually not be that bad for him.
I completely agree with you. So this is where I want to get into Rashad Bateman. And again, just as big a fan as you are, thought about maybe putting him as my number 2. I think I'm going to wind up having as my number 3, just because I think Waddle's explosiveness might just give him a whole other gift. But Bateman is a true number 1 receiver. Bateman is a guy that you can build your new wide receiver core around, and I don't want to get that lost in translation anywhere. He wound up measuring in at 6'3", 190 pounds, and I want to talk about the weight because I saw all this, and it's crap. It's absolute crap. Because he was not 210, because he was 190, is he a little too lean? Are you kidding me? Now this is where I pride us in this show. Because there are times where measurables mean more in certain guys in certain situations, and other guys, it doesn't mean anything. And what I mean by that is that when you watch the tape, we talked about this with the running backs, not every 190 is made the same. Not every 190 is made the same. You watch the tape on Rashad Bateman, who came out later on and said, hey, I never played at plus 200 pounds. So they had me listed at 210. I never played at plus 200 pounds. So we can assume that he's been playing at about 190, 195, probably most of his collegiate career to begin with. The guy is a physical monster on the perimeter. That's how he plays. He gives it back to the corner. He makes a lot of great in-traffic catches, goes up and gets the ball. He out-physicals the other guy, and he's built well. He's built stocky. He's built solid. So I don't care that he weighs at 190 because of the way he's built. This is where you can't just look at numbers and ignore what's actually being played right in front of your face. And that is why, again, we go back to, we are here to make you guys better fantasy football players, better football minds in general. Part of it is taking in all of the variables. Measurables and stats are tools. Sometimes tools are irrelevant for certain jobs. You're not going to use a flathead screwdriver when you need a Phillips. It's the same idea when it comes to certain measurables for certain guys, because how they're built is more important than what they actually weigh, and how they play is more important than all of that as well. Rashad Bateman is a 6'3" physical monster on the outside. Now, the other reason besides Waddle being a little bit more explosive is that Bateman doesn't get a lot of natural separation the way Waddle does. But he's a guy who's going to beat you on the outside. He's going to make that contested catch. You're going to throw it up to him, and you're going to feel safe in doing so. He doesn't get a lot of natural separation. But the big question on him, and this is why I couldn't understand why there was any negativity around him in his pro day. The big question on him was, how fast was he really? Because the knock on people had on him when watching his tape was that they argued that he didn't have elite speed. Well, guess what? The guy ran a 4.39. Even if you want to pro day adjust that and make it a 4.4, a 4.44, guess what? That's still top end speed for a guy who's going to beat you up and be a target monster potentially on any team and be your wide receiver one. That's a DeAndre Hopkins type of level right there.
It's the same 40 Ja'Marr Chase ran.
Exactly. So he's fast enough. Guess what? And that was supposed to be his only knock coming into this thing until they want to bring up the weight, which is a non-issue. It's a non-issue.
And I just want to clarify when you talk about separation. Dan's talking more about deep ball threats. Rashad Bateman is going to get separation because he's a great route runner. So that's one of the things that is important to kind of keep in mind. It's not just about your 40 sometimes, but he's talking more about the explosive down the field plays. He's more apt to go up and go to the ball and be contested, 30, 40 yards down the field versus blowing by guys. But when it comes to getting open in intermediate routes or the short routes,
he's got a full
Bateman's
route.
a fantastic, exactly.
He might be, besides Ja'Marr Chase, he might be the only other receiver that has a true full route tree. Because even a lot of what Waddle does is a lot of screens and stuff like that. He has a full route tree. I'm glad you did clarify that, because yes, that's not what I mean by getting separation necessarily. He has a full route tree. There's nothing he can't run and do and get open on, which is why we compare him quite a bit to DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm totally on board with that. As far as where I want to see, there's a number of teams where you can see the Panthers were going to be my pick, as I said, because of the way Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and those three could kind of play off of each other in a Joe Brady offense. That would be a perfect fit. But again, from a football standpoint, because fantasy standpoint, I got to deal with Sam Darnold, and I got to deal with the fact that you're going to spread all these targets around. And Joe Brady spreads targets around even when he has bad receivers. So think about when you have good receivers. As far as, the Eagles or another team, or if you want to rebuild your wide receiver core, that's a good guy to do it. It's a lot of teams that we talked about already, the Chargers too, but I do want one different team, because I don't think he's necessarily going to go in the top 20. And I'll let you go in a second, Chris. I don't think he's necessarily going to go in the top 20. The place where I think would be really, really interesting, especially for the future, because one of their wide receivers is only going to be there for another year. So it wouldn't be a 2021 great for fantasy-wise, but dynasty-wise it would be. That's the Indianapolis Colts at 21. I think there's a real shot he's there at 21. He could be the T.Y. Hilton replacement. He would mix in right there with Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell, but I think he would automatically be the number one receiver in a Frank Reich, Carson Wentz resurgence type of offense. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I actually think he'll go before Smith. We're talking about, I think Smith is a top 20. I think that's where he's going to wind up going. I think Bateman, the other great fit, you kind of touched on, is the Eagles. They need a true number one. And after draft, I will agree with you, Jalen Reagor is not a number one receiver. And they don't have currently on their roster a number one receiver when you look at that team. I think he'd be a fantastic fit for them. And that's where, fantasy-wise, I think he'd be the most productive and most relevant. I think Smith, actually, we're talking about fits for him before, but I think I looked at kind of the teams coming after him. I think he actually would be a nice fit for the Colts. I think the Titans. I think Devontae Smith makes a lot of sense for the Titans. I think that's where he'd be ideal. But I do think, like I said, I'm a little bit different in the opinion where Bateman falls. You think falls kind of top 20 or into the top 20. I think actually Bateman goes before Smith after that 40.
Here's what I'm going to say to that is there are a wide range of outcomes when it comes to a lot of these mock drafts because teams and analysts are just all over the place. And a lot of that has to do with just not having as much contact this year as you would normally. So there's a wide range. There's a range out there where Bateman falls outside the top 20. There's a range out there where you're speaking to where you could go ahead of Devonta Smith. I just think because of the hype around Devonta Smith, I think he will go ahead of Bateman in the draft. That's the only reason why I would think that would be the case. I mean, I would take Bateman ahead of Devonta Smith, but that's the only reason why I say that. And if that happens and you have a Jamar Chase and a Waddle and Devonta Smith already off the board, I think there's a decent chance Bateman does fall just outside the top 20, not outside the first round, but outside the top 20. That's the only reason why I think there's a chance he might be there for the Colts there. The Titans are a great fit for any of these receivers that happen to fall that far. I don't know who it's going to be. There's a real chance it's one of these top four. They would, whoever it is, it doesn't matter who it is. It won't be Jamar Chase. We know that much. And it probably won't be Waddle. But if it is a Smith or a Bateman, whoever pairs up next to A.J. Brown is not only going to be fantasy relevant from a dynasty standpoint, but it's going to be fantasy relevant for 2021 because there's going to be there's a target hole there right now. Josh Reynolds is a nobody. Don't tell me Josh Reynolds is going to be somebody, going to be something in Tennessee. He's not. He's a nobody. He's a guy. That's it. He's not gonna command targets. They get one of these guys, especially if it's a Bateman, you go in and out with AJ Brown, how physical that receiver core would be. But even if it's a Devonta Smith, who they can kind of line up you can let Josh Reynolds do his little vertical thing on the perimeter and let Devonta Smith operate in the slot, have him and AJ Brown go back and forth. Whoever gets drafted by Tennessee Titans, I do think they'll take a wide receiver. If it's not in the first round, at least in the second round, but I do think they'll take a wide receiver. It's going to be very, very interesting. So that is a good team to kind of bring up in that situation. Next guy I want to talk about, I love this guy. I wish he wasn't so short, but I really love this guy. Rondale Moore. I mean, from a athletic standpoint, he is Tyreek Hill. From an athletic standpoint, all of his measurables match up. The 4.29 40, the 4.25 vertical, the 6.65 cone drill. The problem is, as small as Tyreek Hill is, Rondale Moore is even shorter at 5'7". So as a result, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where he can be a true perimeter wide receiver. And because of that, if you're going to get pigeonholed in the slot, that's where I don't know if he goes in the first round. I don't think he falls any later in the second round. I'll say that much. But that's why I'm not sure he definitely goes in the first round, because if you're a receiver who can't go inside, outside, I don't know if you definitely get drafted in the first round or not. So when they talk about guys like Terrace Marshall getting drafted ahead of him, that wouldn't surprise me, even though I think that would be a mistake. But Rondale Moore is the guy. You want to talk about a guy who gets natural separation like it's nobody's business, who's not only fast, but incredibly quick, can do anything, can help your special teams out, makes big plays. I mean, he will be, if you're a team who wanted to build your wide receiving core, your offense around a slot receiver, you could do it with him because he's just so athletically gifted. The problem is there's no one to compare him to at that height who had a great career, let's say. What's your thoughts on Rondale Moore? And I'll talk after you go. I'll talk about where I want him to go.
I do wonder if he does go in the first round, but having said that, I do think he's a first round talent. 5'7" is hard to kind of overcome, but this guy can ball. I mean, there's not a whole lot of guys that are as explosive as have so much that they bring, not only the return game, but on the passing game, and just have the ability to constantly just break it. Now the knock on him is his injury. He got banged up a lot in college, so he hadn't had a whole lot of consistency when it comes to being year in, year out, playing all the games that are necessary. So that is a little bit concerned. But when I look at some of the teams, especially when you start getting into the 1920 area, you got teams like Washington, you got teams like Chicago. I think he fits their schemes very well. They like to get the ball quickly. They want to have somebody who can kind of make plays with the ball. I think he kind of fits those two teams. As realistic as I kind of think, if he were to go in the first round, I could see him going to teams like Jacksonville, their second first round pick that they have. They don't have a whole lot other than right now DJ Shark, and I think they could use some upgrades, especially explosiveness. We kind of seen Urban Meyer use like Percy Harvin type of players. I think he kind of fits that mold. And then where I'd love to see him, which would make me super happy, is two teams in particular. if he were to stay in the first round or getting to go in the first round. That would be the Saints and the Packers. Either one of those guys, either one of those teams definitely could use upgrade to receiver positions. And when you look at what they have in place, they have the true number one. Putting Moore as your number two in that slot for either one of those teams adds a completely different dimension for both of them. Sean Payton would love to use him. You can see what Sean Payton would just probably, get his jollies off week in, week out, having a guy like that he can move all over. And then Green Bay, just please give Aaron Rodgers one more explosive player. Please. You put him next to Devontae Adams or inside Devontae Adams in the slot. Imagine what they could do.
It's hard to argue with any of that. My bold team was going to be Kansas City because you have a situation there with no Sammy Watkins. They got to add somebody. I don't think Mecole Hardman's the answer. And I know you're thinking like, whoa, with Tyreek Hill, guess what? You have Travis Kelce. Tyreek Hill can play anywhere on the field. He's already proven that. You have another really fast guy who gets natural separation. You pair him up with a Patrick Mahomes and an Andy Reid. The amount of explosiveness just astounds me. And the thing about Rondale Moore, unlike a Mecole Hardman or DeMarcus Robinson, he can actually run routes. That's why I don't think it's going to be Hardman. So if he goes in the first round, I could see that. Whether or not Kansas City will take and I think it's a possibility Kansas City would continue to take more weapons just because it is Andy Reid and how invested they are in that offense.
There's a lot of rumors talking about that they're all looking at the receiver in this draft.
Yeah, and so I do think it's because I know there's a lot of people out there too who want to say like, well, they got to draft, more offensive linemen or they got to take some defensive help. I'm like, yeah, except for you got Andy Reid who comes from that long line, that old school Green Bay line of thinking where it's get weapons for your quarterback every single year. And if only the Packers actually had that mindset now, what would have happened? But because he comes from that old school mindset of that, I do believe a wide receiver going there is a very real possibility. And I could see a Rondale Moore. I don't think it's a redundancy there with Tyreek Hill because of just what they could do. I mean, imagine all the jet sweeps and all the creativity that they could do with those two players on the field at the same time. I mean, the matchup nightmare that would take place. So that would be my bowl team for him to go. I do think ultimately, because he wound up being 5'7", he's gonna wind up going in the second round. We'll see. But this is a guy you definitely have to pay attention to because he's just such a unique athletic talent. The next guy I want to talk about is Terrace Marshall. And I had to go back and I had to watch his tape a couple of times. Physically, he's a prototypical wide receiver. Physically, he's 6'2", 205. He ran a 4.4 40, has a 39 vertical. He can make big plays. I don't love his hands. I don't love his route running ability. He doesn't sink his hips in and out of his breaks. So the natural separation is not going to be there when he's actually trying to run a full route tree, which I don't believe he has to begin with. He's not, I don't think he plays to his size. He's 6'2", 205. I don't think he's the guy who plays as physical as he should. And I question the consistency of his hands. There's quite a few times where I saw him drop the ball when going through his tape where it was hit dead in the chest and nobody around him, and he was still just flat out dropping it and just lack of concentration more so than anything on his part. Having said all that, there's a lot of talk about him going to the first round, which I don't think he's a first round talent, but if he did, and if he went to the Packers, I do think that would be very, very interesting because you would have another explosive big body threat on the opposite side, Devontae Adams. For my knocks on Terrace Marshall, I do think he's better than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I do think he's better than St. Brown or Devin Funchess. I do think he's better than any other receiver not named Devontae Adams on that Green Bay Packers team. And his skill set, I think, reminds me of a poor man's Will Fuller. And I think that would fit great with a Devontae Adams if that were to happen from a fantasy standpoint. But from my actual football evaluation, I wouldn't even be thinking about this guy before the second round, quite frankly. And there's a lot of things that I have red flags on and how good he can really be. And I know that's a different opinion than most people have, frankly. What's your thoughts?
I mean, I echo those sentiments. I'm not a big Marshall fan. I will give him, he led the country in contested catch percentage last year at 80%. He can go up and get the ball in amongst people. But to your point, there's too many plays where he just doesn't make the right play. He doesn't run great patterns. He doesn't catch the ball consistently for the easier catches. He can make the contested catches, but he doesn't. And he played in the slot almost predominantly at LSU. I do question whether he can get off the line. I was not impressed with him for most of the tape that I watched. I feel like he had kind of usually the second or third best corner sticking him, and he rarely dominated any of the games. Like I said, he can go up and get the ball. If he was to go in the first round, I think the best fit for him would be Kansas City. You kind of talked about Moore. I think he kind of complements the rest of their offense a little bit better. And I think that he would have an opportunity with Patrick Mahomes to get some red zone targets. And that was where he's going to be most effective because he can catch the ball in the red zone. He can catch the ball when it's in contested catches. But there's little else that the guy really brings to the field to me. I honestly think this guy's a third or fourth round talent. I don't understand the hype. I don't understand. I see people are looking at how tall he is, the build, and kind of going off of that. But I've seen other guys like Cortland Sutton in the past who got kind of overlooked because of the tall and the build is similar. And they're way better with feet. They had way better quickness. I'm not impressed with this guy. I think he's kind of a one-trick pony. He kind of reminds me of a red zone only target. And I think that when he gets drafted, particularly if he's going to play in the slot, I don't think he's going to be particularly that great.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on there as well. I'm not impressed with Marshall the way a lot of people are. The next guy I want to talk about, I have more of a bone to pick because not only am I not impressed with him, it doesn't make any sense why people think that he's going to be this great fantasy asset or even football asset. That's Kadarius Toney. How many times have we seen these tweener gadget players, which is what Kadarius Toney is? Yes, he's a phenomenal athlete. All these guys are at this point when you're talking about them in the NFL draft. I'm not taking away his athleticism from him. He ran a 4.4 140, so we can up that to a 4.45 if we want to. He's 5'11", 194, which isn't a bad size for a slot receiver. But that's the other thing. You don't even know what position he's going for. Some people have him listed as a running back. Some people have him listed as a wide receiver. Best case scenario, he's a Curtis Samuel. Even if he turns into Curtis Samuel, who did get drafted high, but Curtis Samuel, who just had his quote-unquote big breakout year, was still the third best receiver on his team. The talk about him going in the first round astounds me. How many times do we see these guys who are these gadget tweener players ever actually go on to have these prolific NFL careers? I mean, my comparison for him, frankly, is Antoine Randall L. He used to play a little quarterback back in high school. Kadarius Toney did. I could see him being in that role. Maybe he turns into a competent slot receiver at some point later on in his career. But that's the other thing about him. I'm not overly impressed with his route running ability, which is why I believe he will be a gadget player. Gadget players don't get used consistently. These are these guys that get talked up a ton in the offseason by their coaches. How we're going to use him. He's going to be all over the field. He's a weapon. He's a positionless player. He's a weapon. Positionless players only work in the NBA. It doesn't work in the NFL because they don't get on the field, period. Because you're not big enough to actually take on the load of a running back. You don't run good enough routes for us to really depend on you as a wide receiver. If somebody takes him in the first round, he's a bust waiting to happen. And from a fantasy standpoint, I go back to the volume. He's never going to have enough volume to really be that valuable, at least as valuable as your people are going to try to push him up to be in Dynasty. And I don't ever see him being a guy you really want to have in redraft leagues. That's my notion of Kadarius Toney. I know it's in the minority out there, but Chris, go ahead and you can talk about him now too.
Well, once again, I'm going to echo the sentiment. We saw all this hype with Shenault last year. And going into the draft and going into fantasy drafts, people kept talking about how Shenault's a weapon. He's going to get the ball. He's going to do this. He's going to do this. 5 catches for 45 yards isn't that impressive. And I don't think it gets you a lot of playing time, to your point. He's a guy that you have to manufacture touches for. Good coaches will do that. Bad coaches will talk about doing that and not do it at all. I worry about this guy, how productive he can be in the pros. I think he's a guy that's almost a strictly gadget player in a sense where he's going to be a lot of screens, a lot of bubble screens, a lot of slants, a lot of crossing patterns. I don't think he runs good patterns. I don't think that he can get down the field quick enough to open it up for people. You kind of see in the highlights, most of his plays are yards after the catch. Now, can he do that? Sure. But this is the NFL, and guys can tackle a little bit better than they can tackle in college. And I think you look at all the different things that he kind of brings to the table. This guy's a dime a dozen. Talk about Curtis Samuel. Like I said, I brought up Shenault. To me, that's what you're looking when you look at a Toney. I don't think that you have a guy who's really a true game-changing receiver. I think you have a player who you kind of utilize here or there, maybe gets 3 or 4 touches you manufacture for per year, per game. And I don't think that's something that I necessarily would hope shouldn't go in the first round. And if it does, I do think it will be hard to justify how productive or unproductive he winds up being.
Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page. I really am. It's going to be you and me against the world when it comes to Kadarius Toney, and I'm perfectly
we were
fine
at the
with
quarterback
that.
position with Mitchell Trubisky and Patrick Mahomes and Sean Watson, so we can be right about this one again.
So,
AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. We'll keep going.
I'm just not very impressed. We had time for one more guy, so I want to go to the top tight end in Kyle Pitts and talk about him before we get into the mailbag segment. Kyle Pitts, to me, is not just the best tight end, but he might be the best pass catcher, period, in this draft. And I don't just mean from a pass catching standpoint, but I mean from the overall weapon that he is, the overall mismatch that he is. When we're going through this process to start, I had a hard time with Kyle Pitts with the idea of him going in the top 10. And the reason is this: I have a hard time taking tight ends in general that high to begin with, especially ones that aren't already coming in as super complete tight ends who, Kyle Pitts is not a great blocker. Now, here's what I'll say. He's definitely a very willing blocker. He wants to, it's not like he's shy. He doesn't shy away from the contact like some non-inline tight ends who are more athletes or more bigger receivers than not. He doesn't shy away from it like they do. So I do think there's room there that you can see him improving in that area because he is already has a mentality where he's willing to do it. And he has the size to do it too. So that's where I think he will get better at that in his game. But when you watch his tape, he runs great routes for his size. He has incredible speed for his size. I mean, the guy ran a 4.40 at, 245 pounds and 6'6". It's insane. But I think the route running ability and the ability he has to catch the ball away from his body, he has elite hands and his elite route running ability. It makes me think that he's just going to be a mismatch nightmare. And when you're talking about guys to build your offense around, Kyle Pitts is one of those guys. He just is. And because of the skill set that he has, and if he does get drafted in the top 10, which is looking more and more like it's going to happen, I do think for the first time in a really, really long time, you're going to have a tight end who's actually set up to be a true redraft commodity, along with being a guy who projects out to be the number one tight end in Dynasty within the next 5 years or so. So I have changed my tune a little bit on would I not draft Kyle Pitts in the top 10? I would. I 100% would. And there's a lot of teams that he would fit. Of course, in my opinion, he could pretty much fit with anybody in any scheme to begin with. But I haven't pinpointed where if the Atlanta Falcons stay at 4. Now, to be clear here, I don't think they should stay at 4. I think their best move is to trade back because of a lot of the holes that they need. But if they were to stay at 4, and you take a Kyle Pitts and you make that a 2 tight end set predominant team with Arthur Smith, which I think he would love to be, by the way. And you have a Julio Jones and a Calvin Ridley. You let Hayden Hurst be the main blocker to help out the offensive line, and you add Kyle Pitts to that team. Look out. Or if he does fall to Miami Dolphins and they trade away Mike Gesicki, that's another situation that would be tremendous, not just for him, but hey, I love Tua Tagovailoa. I know you do too. Any of the haters out there, you're not going to be able to hate on Tua anymore if Kyle Pitts goes to Miami at 6 either. So I love Kyle Pitts. I'm right in the main line with them. Chris, you can go ahead and give me your thoughts on Kyle Pitts.
So I kind of struggle with Kyle Pitts and the value. You talked about not drafting tight ends and kind of how you looked at it before the top 10. I think there's a lot of talk about what he actually is going to play in the NFL. They had talked to different GMs. Several teams look at him as strictly as a tight end. Some teams are looking at playing him at receiver. His agent's considering playing him at receiver so that I can get more money for him. If I evaluate him as a receiver, I don't see him as a top 10 talent. If I evaluate him as a tight end, I can see what you're excited about. I can see the mismatches. But I can also point out there are guys that he kind of reminds me of Darren Waller. Darren Waller went in the 6th round. Darren Waller went in the 6th round because he has similar skill set, 6'6", ran a 4.44.
That would be redone.
He was a receiver,
today.
But he came out as a receiver. That was the big difference. He didn't come out as a tight end. He came out as a receiver. And that's where I think it's going to be interesting to see what is this guy truly utilized as. Yes, he's a mismatch versus linebackers. Yes, he's a mismatch for safeties. His mismatch is such a mismatch versus corners. Absolutely. That's what I want to see. Do you believe that? I don't necessarily have the proof that I think if he came out and they talk as the GMs, if he came out as strictly as a receiver, where would he go in this draft? And it's not nearly as high as if he's coming out as a tight end. So here we go.
That's crap.
Well, then you got to talk to the GMs then.
Consensus. Look at the GMs. The consensus across the league is that Kyle Pitts is the best pass catcher in this league. I'm not, that's not just me. Best pass catcher, meaning if he was a wide receiver, he would be rated, if not in front of Jamar Chase, right there with Jamar Chase. Because I just talked about the unnatural ability at his size that he has to run routes. Because he's not just a Darren Waller. Because when Darren Waller came into the league, he wasn't a good route runner. He was just athletic. He was fast. He developed that part of his game. Kyle Pitts is already a finished product. He has a full receiver tree. Now, I agree with you. The part, I think if you put him at the tight end position, that boosts his value a bit. But the consensus is, you want to know what the consensus is out there, is that he's the best pass catcher, period, in this NFL draft class.
If he played a wide receiver, you think he would be considered a top wide receiver? That's the consensus. He'd be a top wide receiver in this draft.
1,000%.
That's the consensus.
1,000%.
No. He's not the top pass catcher.
What? Based on who?
Based on how people evaluate him. If you have Smith and you have Chase as guys who were going before him, and you have Waddle who's going before him, how is he considered the best receiver?
They don't,
because he's 6'6", he's a mismatch, and he's 240. He's good. He doesn't get nearly, talk about separation. He doesn't get nearly separation when he's playing against corners. He doesn't get nearly separation. Now he can go up and get the ball. Yes, he can go up and get the ball. But can he get off the line against guys? Can he run different patterns when he's outside? Yeah. I see him almost always in the slot.
Well, you got to watch more tape. You got to watch more tape, because I watched a lot of tape where he lined up on the perimeter and danced circles around some of these corners. And I'm not talking about corners from middle of nowhere. I'm talking about Florida State. I'm talking about LSU. I'm talking about these top ACC teams across the board. I'm talking about Clemson. He danced circles around. I'm talking about Alabama. He had a great game against Alabama. He went up against the top competition.
And he didn't play receiver in that Alabama game.
And dominated. He played tight end.
Technically,
he played tight end in all those games,
yes,
but they line him up at different positions. I'm with you on the whole which he should go out at. I think he should go out as a tight end, because at 245, I think it's just hard to be a wide receiver all the time. But I think as a tight end, you just have a guy who can just change the game, because he is a mismatch for corners and safeties and linebackers. I don't know what mock drafts you're looking at, but other than Jamar Chase,
it's not mock drafts.
I'm saying other than Jamar Chase, I don't see Waddle or Smith or Bateman or any of these guys going ahead of Kyle Pitts in any of these mock drafts. So I don't know where it is you're looking at that has all these receivers going in front of them.
At tight end, if he came out as a receiver,
I'm telling
what
you
I said
right now, because you've already had these people talk about, even if he was a wide receiver, that they would have him right there at either, like I said, either next to Jamar Chase or ahead of Jamar Chase. I mean, that's already been out there. That's been out there. But I'm sorry. I would like to let you rebuttal, actually, but we got to move on because we're running out of time. Let's hit the break real quick. We get the mailbag segment on the other side. You guys are listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, WWSRN, presented to you by Belly Up Sports.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her.
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge.
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve. It's now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend.
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org, a public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is you over 30 years ago.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
And this is your mom when you drive her back from therapy.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Roles change without us noticing, and in your new role, we help you help. AARP gives you the information to help care for your mom so that you can have patience with her, just like she did with you. Visit aarp.org/caregiving or call 1-877-333-5885 to get practical health and wellness tips to provide even better care for your loved one.
Are we there yet?
Remember, visit aarp.org/caregiving. AARP, we help you help. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Welcome back in, MD Nation. You are listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, WWSRN, also presented to you by Belly Up Sports. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mater. Joined here with me is Chris Dowhauer. And we just had it out in the last segment at the end there. I should have made more time on Kyle Pitts. That's on me. We'll do that next time. We'll make sure we have that ahead. But we talked about our NFL draft receivers. We'll talk about Kyle Pitts. We'll talk about some more tight ends on the Belly Up Fantasy live show at 8:30 at Belly Up Fantasy. Check us out then when we get Adam and Lamaro back on that crew. And then we also talked about earlier in the show the Sam Darnold trade, the Giovanni Bernard cut, and the Deshaun Watson update. So make sure when you go back, you watch all this on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network at WWSRN or your favorite streaming app. We're available to you on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, iTunes, wherever you like to go. We're widely available to you. So we are in the mailbag segment. I do first, real quickly, want to go through the poll results that we had, and MD Nation's been gracious enough to be able to vote on these things and give us an idea on what people are thinking. And one of the things that surprised me, one of the polls that we had, was, will Matt Stafford finish as a top 10 quarterback? 67% said yes. And that surprised me because I thought Matthew Stafford was going to be a guy who's going to be one of my big sleepers going through the offseason. And now I'm not so sure, because if that many people have the mindset they really believe he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, well, now all of a sudden his ADP might be at what his actual value is, in which case I probably won't draft him because I'm always looking for value, not at value, quite frankly. Two of the other questions that we had, which Steelers wide receiver would you draft first for the upcoming season? No surprise there. Deontay Johnson, 49%, Juju Smith-Schuster, 18%, and Chase Claypool had 32%. So well ahead of Juju, but Deontay, the number one guy there. I agree with that. And then who would you rather have in your fantasy squad? Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, or Aaron Jones? 45% went with Jonathan Taylor, 35% Nick Chubb, and 19% Aaron Jones. Who would you rather have, Chris, out of those three running backs?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd probably go with Aaron Jones.
So you want to go with the 19%. That is a tough one. I think because of the target share, I'm with you. I think I'm with you there.
The Williams, I think that's a big key moving forward this year, and not having a receiver till they actually draft one, or they ever do draft one. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. So let's have Ben ask us the first question for today in the mailbag.
All right, the first question is from Gordon, and it is, what do you think Hayden Hurst's value in 2021 is?
All right. So what do you think Hayden Hurst? Well, this is going to greatly depend on what happens in the draft, because we just talked about the possibility that maybe they draft a Kyle Pitts at 4, or maybe they trade back. Let's assume for a second they don't draft a Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst is the top tight end. I think his value is a high end tight end too, and I think there's with upside there, because with Arthur Smith, he has already the track record of targeting the tight ends in the red zone position, especially more consistently than Derek Cutter does. So I would have to imagine that at least Hayden Hurst would have an opportunity for somewhere between 7 and 9 touchdowns. And if he gets that, then he could be a low-end tight end 1, regardless of his receptions and yards. What do you think?
I think it's interesting. Like you talked about, the draft will kind of be a big factor whether they take Pitts or not. I don't think necessarily that Arthur Smith is going to guarantee to make Hayden Hurst more productive. You kind of saw him utilize multiple tight ends last year in Tennessee and in the last few years in Tennessee. He likes to have Janu Smith never had that big breakout year everybody's been waiting for because Ferkster got on the field. They utilized Pruitt. I think you're going to see this guy kind of have an opportunity to do what he did last year. He'll be some games will have some, decent games here or there, kind of like Hooper did, and then kind of fade to the background in other games. It's not somebody that I'm super excited about going into this draft, and that's going into this year. And I don't think Hayden Hurst necessarily just improves because Arthur Smith is there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Let's hear what Ben had to say.
Obviously, the Falcons have great targets in Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, both of which could be wide receiver ones. But the problem with fantasy football is the tight end position outside of the top 5 is horrendous. I think Hayden Hurst is a good guy to have as maybe your backup tight end. You might have a big game or two when your starter is out, but other than that, I don't think he has much value. I guess we got to see how the Falcons incorporate him this year and what the Falcons offense this year really looks like.
All right, Ben echoing some of the same sentiments there. Let's get our question number 2.
The next question is from Drew. Dynasty PPR Superflex. Miles Sanders or the first pick in the 4th round?
Miles Sanders or the 4th pick in the 1st round and PPR Superflex. Give me the first pick in the 4th round. I'm doing this more from the mindset of because it's a Superflex, you probably need another quarterback. You get the 4th pick, you're probably going to have a good crack at somebody who is in a good situation, whether maybe it would be a Zach Wilson or, for instance, let's say if hypothetically, excuse me, the 49ers were to take a Justin Fields, I would love that fit for a fantasy standpoint. But Miles Sanders, it's more importantly about Miles Sanders where, yes, he comes to a situation where the mobile quarterback does help the running back, but this is a guy that I question will ever play a full season. And I also question if he ever won't be in some sort of platoon. Now, they just signed Jordan Howard. It's not really going to shake your confidence in him too much there, other than maybe Howard comes in and steals some goal line touches from him. But this is a guy I don't know if he ever is going to be truly a workload back. Give me the 4th pick. Give me a crack. I mean, even if you wind up drafting a Najee Harris, depending upon the situation he has, I think he'd be more valuable. So I actually would rather have the 4th pick. What about you, Chris?
I'd rather have the 4th pick too. You talked about this is a PPR league we're talking about, and I think one of the things that running quarterback does affect is Hurst is not going to necessarily check the ball down. He's going to run. So I think that Sanders is going to have some of the receptions kind of be deducted from his production moving forward. And to your point, I don't think he's necessarily a bell cow running back. So I don't think he makes up for it because he's, with the yardage rushing. I think this is a guy I definitely would try to flip and take the 4th pick over.
Let's hear what Ben had to say.
I really like Miles Sanders this year. I think that with Jalen Hurts being the quarterback, it's going to be hard for teams to put all of their attention on Miles Sanders. I think they got to focus on Hurts running the ball as well. But obviously the Eagles do not have good receivers. They really haven't addressed that too much this offseason either. So I'm expecting Miles Sanders to get a lot of carries, a lot of catches out of the backfield. I love Miles Sanders. Keep Miles Sanders.
Ben disagreeing. Oh, Ben, we'll teach you soon. Don't worry. Someday. Let's get one more question in.
Next question is John, and it's Mike Evans and a 4th round pick in 2021 for Cam Akers.
So Mike Evans and a 4th round rookie pick in 2021 for Cam Akers. John was asking, yeah, I do that deal. I do that deal because especially in Dynasty, it's a much easier time finding wide receivers. And if you can get Cam Akers, who looks like he's the next breakout running back, especially what we saw at the end of last season, I don't think Darrell Henderson's going to be in a platoon situation for him. I think he's going to be more of a guy who's going to spell him, not platoon with him, because the offense was just much more effective when they started giving the ball to Cam Akers 20 times a game. I think Sean McVay will continue with that. Matthew Stafford makes that offense better. They're going to be more prolific. He's going to have more opportunities to score. Mike Evans is great. I love Mike Evans. But ultimately, it's hard to find that running back, and that's why I would do the deal. What about you?
I tend to agree. I think it depends on what you already have in place as well, though. If you already kind of are loaded at running back, moving on from Mike Evans, who I think had, in my opinion, a down year last year, I think he has an opportunity to have even a better year moving forward. And the 4th pick, you don't know what that turns out to be. But I think looking at Cam Akers, if you're trying to rebuild your team in a sense and you're building around your running back position, you want to have a guy who's up and coming like Akers in your backfield.
The other thing that worries me about Mike Evans is the annual hamstring injuries you always have to deal with too, which is kind of annoying. So that's going to do it for the show today, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. We will be back next week. Chris, I think we're doing the coaching changes fantasy impact next week. Am I correct?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. So that's a great episode to talk about, especially as we're leading into the NFL draft. We'll talk about, where what these new schemes are, how these players fit in these schemes, what we can expect based off of these schemes. So all of that's going to be coming to you next week. Of course, if anything crazy happens in the NFL, we'll update you on that as well. That'll be part of the show. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Make sure you're checking out the Worldwide Sports Radio Network at WWSRN. Make sure you're downloading the app. There are really a lot of great sports content, a lot of great sports shows coming out of there 24/7. And make sure you're checking out Belly Up Fantasy Sports for all the articles that have been coming out and we're going to give you the inside edge to really help you be able to win your leagues in fantasy football. I'm your host, Dan Mader. I'm joined here with Chris Dowhauer. We'll see you guys all real soon. Make sure you subscribe to at Belly Up Fantasy, at Belly Up MDFF Show, any chance you have on any social media outlet to see and watch and listen to this show. Take care, guys.
CMB Nation.